Out today, the sun is coming out. It's a little slower than we might like, but it is coming out. For those who don't know me, my name is Sean Sublette. I'm a meteorologist. That's how I know the sun is going to come out. And I am a native of Richmond. I moved away for a little while, but came back about 5 years ago because this area means so much to me. We're not doing just the rally here. We are part of 50 different Stand Up for Science rallies nationwide. So big hand for everybody coming out. We have a number of speakers this afternoon running the gamut from healthcare sciences to environmental science. And I am very grateful to them spending some time with us, taking some time this afternoon, as well as all of you being here. Special thanks to Susan Parks. Susan, where are you? Yeah. Susan is the co-organizer of this event, doing a lot of logistical work, so thank you. Also thank you for the numerous volunteers and for the Capitol Police for being here to be sure everybody is safe. And I need to check to be sure everybody's behaving. They are. Excellent. So after all, this is a non-violent protest. We do want to remind everybody of that. I'm glad you're here. You're frustrated and bringing your anger at what the federal government is stealing from us. But those people in the executive branch of the federal government just want to provoke us, right? So we are not going to play their little performative game. So why do we stand up for science? Because science is under attack in a way that is unprecedented since World War II. Since that time, our leaders on both sides of the aisle had understood that foundational investments in science are critical to American innovation, prosperity, health, and national security. So what happened? What happened? Well, good science also leads to prediction. And I want to read you a passage from Carl Sagan that he wrote 30 years ago. Maybe you've heard of this. It's from his book in the mid-90s called The Demon Haunted World. It's very prophetic. He says, quote, "I have a foreboding of an America in my children's or grandchildren's time when the United States is a service and information economy, when nearly all the manufacturing industries have slipped away to other countries, and when awesome technological powers are in the hands of very few, and no one representing the public interest can even grasp the issues. When the people have lost the ability to set their own agendas or knowledgeably question those in authority. When, clutching our crystals, nervously consulting our horoscopes, our critical faculties in decline, unable to distinguish between what feels good and what's true, we slide, almost without noticing, back into superstition and darkness. We have seen this accelerate over the last 14 months. Well-earned research grants canceled suddenly. Career scientists fired without cause. And now, our national science labs, which are the envy of the world, are now being shut down and sold for parts by this administration. As a meteorologist, one of these hits me especially hard, as my friend Ben Woods here would also tell you. Since the 1960s, the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Colorado has done groundbreaking work that has provided results for all of us here in America, developing new ways to detect turbulence and wind shear to make flying safer, and producing the building blocks that go into all of our weather apps. This administration is counting on Americans to forget the importance of science. So we are here and we stand up. Those of us of a certain age remember the Keystone poisoning of the James River in the 1970s. We remember the ozone hole in the 1980s. We remember the thick haze that hovered over our cities, just like Richmond, especially during the summer through the 1990s. And while there is certainly more work to be done, our rivers are now safer, the ozone hole is slowly healing, and our air is cleaner. Scientists gathered the data, determined the causes, and our leaders then were wise enough to listen to professional scientists and implement solutions. It wasn't luck, it wasn't magic, it wasn't divine intervention. Y'all know what it was. It was
science!
Exactly. And we will not go back. We now face the ultimate environmental challenge of our time, climate change. And no matter how much they lie about the science, no matter how much they hide the science, we will not be deterred. Education is the cornerstone of discovery, and with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker. She is an experienced educator and champion of the environment. She spent 30 years as a professor, first at the University of Richmond and then at Reynolds Community College. She was first elected to the State Senate in 2019, named chair of the Senate Education and Health Committee in 2024, and was elected to be Lieutenant Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia last fall. Please welcome Lieutenant Governor Ghazala Hashmi.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Sean. Thank you to Susan. Thank you for all the organizers who are bringing us together. I really appreciate our determination to stick together to highlight this very critical and important first anniversary of the Stand Up for Science movement. And as we gather today, we're sadly facing increasing urgencies on so many numerous concerns and on state, national, and global levels. The actions that we either take or do not take will have profound consequences, not just for our lives, but for generations to come. And I want to address my comments today on two essential concerns that are being targeted by obfuscation, by deliberate lies, and the political will by some in offices who refuse to respond to what is happening right in front of us. And those two concerns are the science of climate change and our responsibility to protect public health. The climate change is accelerating. Infectious diseases that we once defeated are returning, and too many of our leaders are choosing the convenience of politics and allegiance to corruption and despotism over scientific evidence, truth, and responsibility. And that's why we're here today. Across the country, communities are already living with the consequences of climate change: floods, fires, heat waves, and storms that grow stronger and result in more damage every year. Here in Virginia, we know the stakes. The evidence is right in front of us. The Hampton Roads region is experiencing some of the fastest sea level rise in the entire Atlantic coast, putting our communities, our infrastructure, our homes at growing risk. And you know what? We actually had an effective tool to fight back. The Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, known as RGGI, was working. In just 2 years, Virginia's participation cut carbon pollution by 22%. It generated hundreds of millions of dollars for flood protection and energy efficiency programs. More than $300 million went directly to community flood preparedness, helping our localities protect homes, roads, and infrastructure from rising water. But the administration of Glenn Youngkin chose ideology over evidence through political maneuvering that a judge eventually ruled was unlawful. Youngkin pulled Virginia out of RGGI, cutting off the only dedicated statewide funding source for flood resilience projects. And as the judicial ruling declared, Youngkin actually lacked the authority to dismantle a program that was created by the legislator. So let's think about what that means. While storms intensify and sea levels rise, sycophantic and political games meant to appeal to climate change denying industries and to a base that denies the evidence of science, the administration of the former governor took away resources meant to protect Virginia's families. That's not leadership, that is negligence. And that's why under the new administration, we're now moving to restore Virginia's place in RGGI. That's why science and facts and data have a real, relevant, and meaningful purpose in policy making and in budget decisions. As we know, the assault on science doesn't stop with climate. Across the country, we're seeing the dangerous return of diseases that we once controlled. Just one example is the exponential and frightening return of measles cases and measles fatalities in this country. In 2023, the United States recorded just 59 cases of measles. In 2024, that number rose to 225 cases. By 2025, the number exploded to over 2,000 confirmed cases, the worst surge in decades, and outbreaks continue today. In 2026, more than 1,100 cases have already been reported nationwide, including major outbreaks that are affecting entire communities. The overwhelming number of infections, over 90%, occur among people who are unvaccinated or whose vaccination status is unknown. But these numbers paint a stark picture. They tell us vaccines work, that these vaccines, most especially our protocols for childhood immunizations, work, and they've worked for generations. But when misinformation spreads faster than science, preventable diseases return. Measles is not a mild childhood illness. It's one of the most contagious viruses known to medicine. It can cause pneumonia, brain inflammation, and death. And it was declared eliminated in the United States in the year 2000 because of vaccination and because of proper education. And just 26 years later, we're now fighting to keep this dangerous disease from coming back. We are facing a clear and present danger to public health. So let's be clear about why we're in this predicament. When influential figures and when quacks who are given power and platforms distort science, the public pays the price and children suffer the consequences. For years, Robert F. Kennedy has amplified misinformation about vaccines, undermining confidence in life-saving medicine and treatment protocols. The damage that he and others of his ilk have caused is immeasurable. When public trust erodes, vaccination rates fall. When vaccination rates fall, outbreaks begin. And when outbreaks begin, children, the elderly, the medically vulnerable are the ones who suffer. This isn't an abstract debate. It's the difference between prevention and tragedy. Sadly, we've seen this playbook repeatedly. Deny climate change, undermine public health officials, cut environmental protections, erode public trust in science and research and experts and institutions. We see it again as Donald Trump weakens environmental safeguards and sidelines aside the scientific expertise of the Environmental Protection Agency. We see it again as state and federal attacks continue on climate policy, attacks on vaccination and childhood immunization, and attacks on the institutions that are designed to protect us. So this debate isn't about left versus right. It's about truth versus deception. It's about evidence versus corrosion of trust in science and reality. And here's the reality. We cannot debate a virus out of existence. We cannot protect public health while undermining science. We cannot respond to climate change while denying the effects of human activities as burning fossil fuels, deforestation, and industrial processes increase heat-trapping greenhouse gases. If we abandon scientific integrity, if we defund critical research and put a target on the backs of the truth tellers of science, if we refuse to pursue evidence-driven solutions, if we consign data to the dust heap, we abandon the very tools that keep our communities safe. So I join you in calling for scientific integrity in public policy. I join you in calling for strong public health protections. I join you in calling for meaningful climate action that protects our communities. And most of all, I join you in calling for an end to the political stunts that dismantle the programs, the institutions that are designed to defend us from disaster. Thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you for adding.
Fantastic. Again, a warm thank you to Lieutenant Governor Ghazala Hashmi. Okay, who here likes seafood? Yeah. Who here likes oysters? All right. Our next speaker knows her oysters. She's a graduate student of coastal and marine sciences, and her area of study is solastalgia, the distress caused by loss of place in indigenous coastal communities of Virginia and Louisiana. Her work explores how tribes express identity through their indigenous knowledge of oyster aquaculture and restoration. She is a nationally ranked oyster shucker and oyster sommelier, known as a mermelier, and she runs her own mobile raw bar called Brains, Beauties, and Bivalves. Please welcome Leila Avery.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, and it's really nice to see everybody out here today. Before I get started, I wanted to say I'm acting as an individual. I'm not representing my institution in any way. The waves crash on the shallow banks of the Chesapeake Bay, spraying my cheeks with a salty ocean spray. And to my delight, I see the songbirds and the dolphins playing in the distance of my Chesapeake Bay. But over the years, I've seen the decay of the place that we once used to call the Bay. Where the marshes once thrived are now open ocean, or the fisheries that have sustained communities have now collapsed. Our oyster reefs lay barren and riddled with disease, only to find our blue crabs scarcely in between. I yearn for the day to return to the bay of my childhood dreams. Now, for a lot of you, you may resonate with that feeling. And that feeling is known as solastalgia. Everyone has felt it, and yet we're not talking about it. That homesickness we feel to be home while you're at home. That loss of place around you that is reinforced by the loss of place in the present. That is my science. My science is standing up for the voices of the displaced due to climate change, highlighting indigenous communities impacted most by our ever-changing world. Here in the Chesapeake Bay, land loss, saltwater intrusion, and shifting ecosystems are environmental change. But there's cultural changes too. When the land disappears, the traditions disappear with it. Science just isn't about models or numbers or graphs. Science is about the people. It is the water we drink, it is the food we harvest, the communities we protect, and the futures we imagine. We stand up for science because we stand up for the truth. And science is not political. It's just another means of telling the truth, and sometimes the truth is scary. There are reasons why science like mine is censored. It challenges the Western idea of extraction and information mining by returning to the communities the government wants to keep quiet. But science only works if it's supported, when it's funded, when it's communicated, and when society chooses to listen. My grandparents were the immigrants and the slaves of this country, and I embody what it truly means to be American. And to be American is to have the right and open access to information. I have the privilege to stand up for science because it is the success of my grandparents. I stand here today not only as a scientist, but as a woman in science, and a minority woman in science at that, where I often find myself being my own representation in every room. There's an attack happening here, where science labeled as DEI is censored or defunded, wherein being a woman is being second class, or being a minority raises all the red flags, and where my support and my allyship is getting confused and called appropriation. Where the words diversity, populations, or communities is no longer viewed as just science. But science belongs to everyone. The students to be the next generation of researchers, the communities founded in traditional ecological knowledge, and for everyone who refused to ignore the changes happening around them. Solastalgia teaches us something powerful, that people care deeply about the places that they call home. That is not weakness, that is not nostalgia, that is not sentimentality. It is motivation. It is the reason why so many scientists dedicate their life to understanding the natural world. The reason why we fight for access to land and water, and the reason why movements like this exist. Because loving a place means to defend it. Standing up for science is not just about protecting research, it's about protecting the future. And my opportunity got taken away by a man who did not understand my connection to land, but I carry on anyway. Because science is not just a profession, it is a commitment to truth, a commitment to curiosity, and a commitment to the world that we share. And when we stand up for science, we are all standing up for the place that we call home. Thank you.
Thank you, Leila. I'm going to find that oyster bar, by the way. I'm going to find it, so guarantee you that. All right, our next speaker is an associate professor of geography and environmental sciences at the University of Richmond. Her research focuses on the relationship between humans and their environment at the intersection of social, economic, environmental drivers and impacts. She collaborates with ecologists, climate scientists, sociologists, and economists to gather the data and do the analyses to scientifically inform policy, because good science is interdisciplinary. She is also the mom of 2 little boys who would live outside if they were allowed to. Please welcome my friend, Professor Stephanie Spera.
My boys are here, so they might just run up because, right. Hey boys. Okay. Hi, my name is Stephanie. I'm an environmental scientist and a university professor. I study how our climate and landscapes are changing and how we can build communities that are resilient to what's coming. I'm also the mom of 2 little boys, a 5-year-old and an almost 3-year-old, and like Sean said, my kids would live outside if they could. They spend their days catching frogs and toads and salamanders and just doing what kids are supposed to do. Get dirty, be curious, and learn that the world around us is worth paying attention to. I'm here today because everything I care about, my kids' health, the air, their future, my career, my students' careers, is under coordinated, deliberate attack. And I want to tell you what that attack actually looks like, because it has a strategy. Delete all the data, ignore all the science, make a quick buck. Lather, rinse, repeat, or whatever Trump does with that thing on his head. Every single rollback, every funding cut, every deleted webpage is designed to make the harm invisible. Because if you can't measure it, it isn't happening. And if it isn't happening, no one's accountable. On February 12th, just 20 odd days ago, this administration rescinded something called the Greenhouse Gas Endangerment Finding. It was the legal foundation for the EPA's authority to regulate carbon emissions. Every climate protection built over the last 15 years rested on this finding. And this repeal doesn't just mean more pollution and greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, it legally dismantles the government's obligation to stop companies from doing so. And I don't think I need to convince anyone here that the scientific consensus on climate change is clear. The physics of greenhouse gases has been understood since the 1800s. Carbon dioxide traps heat. We can measure it. We can measure it into the atmosphere down to the number of parts per million. Climate change science isn't about political ideology, it's about thermodynamics. The EPA's Causes of Climate Change website, which once accurately stated that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, now only mentions natural causes. Volcanic eruptions, changes in Earth's orbit, as if the last 150 years of industrialization didn't happen. As if every peer-reviewed study, every temperature record, every ice core, every coastal tide gauge just doesn't exist. Scientists and archivists have been racing to scrape and save federal data sets before they disappear forever. And why does this matter? Well, let's look to 8 days later. On February 20th, this administration finalized the repeal of MATS, which is the Mercury and Air Toxic Standards, which means that coal plants can now not only release a dangerous amount of mercury into the atmosphere, they're also no longer required to monitor their own emissions. You cannot protect against what you refuse to measure, and that's their whole point. Mercury, by the way, is a neurotoxin. It damages developing brains. And what is maybe the most wild about the repeal of maths is that the standards Trump nixed had already reduced mercury emissions by 90% since 2012. 9-0. Maths was working. So this wasn't really about removing a cumbersome burden. It was about a bailout for a dying industry. Trump's weird nostalgia for an era that never existed, and all paid for with children's neurological development, and made possible because a week earlier, they'd stripped the legal framework that would have stopped them. But wait, I thought we really wanted to make America healthy again. If you want to make America healthy, you definitely don't start by increasing our exposure to known neurotoxins. If you wanted to make America healthier, the research is clear. The biggest drivers of chronic disease in this country are not seed oils and food dye. They are poverty, lack of healthcare access, pollution, environmental racism, a healthcare system designed to treat disease rather than prevent it. But addressing those things requires investment, data, regulation, and confronting the industries that profit from making us sick. Instead, Maha gives you a brand and some talking points about raw milk while lining their own pockets and gutting the agencies that would expose their damage. And I'll close with what this war on science cost me personally. I'm one of the thousands of scientists who had grant funding doged. I lost an $800,000 NASA grant that would have funded working with the Native American tribes across Virginia to better understand how Virginia's climate is changing. It was 80 degrees yesterday. It is March. And after this winter, I understand I should not be complaining, but I will take the allergies if it means we get spring. It's hotter here than it used to be. Storms are dropping a month's worth of rain in a single afternoon. Sea level is rising on our state's coastline faster than almost anywhere in the US. And you could be thinking something along the lines of course you're upset about this stuff, it funds your job. Fair. But of that $800,000 grant I talked about 1% would have gone to my summer salary because I'm a teacher and I get paid 9 months out of the year. Know that I'm literally counting down the days until my oldest starts kindergarten, so I have one less daycare payment. If I wanted to get rich manipulating data, I would have sold out to Dominion years ago. What the cancellation of these grants actually represents is the loss of investment in future scientists. The other 99% of our grant money would have literally paid to keep the lights on in our building, provided lab equipment, and trained students, recent graduates, and early career scientists. The students and early career researchers who depend on all of these doged opportunities to gain experience and build careers are now being pushed out of the field. I know the class of 2026 well. I teach the seniors. So many talented people are not going to graduate school, and it's not because they aren't good enough, it is because the funding is gone. Trump and his cronies are engineering a lost generation of American scientists. And for what? So polluters can save on compliance costs, and their CEOs can pocket that extra money for their own bonuses? Science should be bipartisan. Children's lungs do not care who you voted for. Mercury does not ask for a party affiliation before it crosses the placenta. And my great-grandchildren should be able to chase tadpoles in the same streams that my boys wade in today. You cannot reverse neurological damage. You cannot negotiate with sea level rise. You cannot drill baby drill your way out of atmospheric chemistry. This moment is not about just about science policy. It's about whether we are willing to defend the infrastructure of truth itself. Data collection, regulatory enforcement, peer review, public transparency. Once you strip the legal authority to regulate pollution, delete the data that proves it's happening, and install people who blatantly ignore science, you have not made America healthy or great again. You have just made it harder for anyone to prove otherwise. Data is not an opinion. Clean air and water are not radical demands. And the landscapes our kids explore are not bargaining chips. And when a government starts rewriting what causes climate change on federal websites and in our national parks, that is not conservative policy. That is authoritarianism in a lab coat. We're not going to stand for this, not quietly and not politely. Scientists are a pain in the ass. We're persistent, we're dogged, we're really good at paying attention to the things we care about. So we're going to keep showing up, keep speaking up, and keep holding this administration accountable, because our kids, our livelihoods, our communities, our planet, we all deserve better. Thanks.
I told you she was good. All right, but a couple of points with that on climate change. The data is there. The buoy data is there. We have measured sea level rise across the Chesapeake Bay and our tidal rivers, from the James, the York, the Rappahannock, the Potomac. It's come up about 1 to 2 feet just in my lifetime. Our climate in Virginia now is kind of like North Carolina's was a century ago. The growing season in Richmond now is about a month longer than it was a century ago. You know what that means? Pollen season starts earlier. That means the allergy season starts earlier. And they get worse because there is a particular protein in the pollen that makes it more allergenic. And with more carbon dioxide, we see that protein getting stronger. So it has a health impact on a lot of people. And with that, I would like to introduce the only doctor in the House of Delegates. He represents York and James City counties. He's a pediatrician whose life's work is to be sure our kids, who are our future leaders, have the access to the best health care possible. He's held multiple bills already passed out of the House of Delegates, including one that allows doctors to talk directly with specialists online, shortening the wait time between patients before patients get the care they need. He studied medicine just over there at VCU, and he's been in practice for more than 25 years. Please welcome Delegate Dr. Mark Downey.
Well, thank you all for coming out. I think my favorite chant was the 2468. We need to vaccinate.
Everybody
vaccinate. So I've been wearing a pin on my lapel the whole General Assembly that says vaccine saves lives. Because that's part of my main drive to run for office. This is my third time running for office. I ran in 2019 and 2021 during the first Trump administration when they started attacking, science and vaccines and that sort of thing. It's only been accelerated with the second time around with the appointment of RFK Jr., a known anti-vaxxer, to head the largest health and human services organization in the world. And no surprise, we are in a position where we're not following the science and the data on vaccines, and we're seeing the consequence. Measles gets all the headlines, but we've had record numbers of pertussis cases the past year. We're starting to see increases in cases of mumps, as well as measles. We're seeing huge outbreaks of flu and COVID because even though, yes, the people that are at higher risk of complications from flu and COVID are those that have high risk conditions, everyone here lives with someone who has a high risk condition. And if you deny vaccines to the loved ones of those folks, guess what? You're putting their lives at jeopardy and their loved ones. And I don't know about you, but I would feel completely upset if I was the one that brought COVID home that was spread to a grandparent or a loved one or a child on chemotherapy where I had an opportunity to prevent it. So that was a whole lost conversation with COVID and flu vaccine as we get out of the pandemic. It's still out there. It still causes devastating complications for people who are at risk. So that's my main reason why I ran for office. I've been a pediatrician for 25 years, grew up in York County, spent many of my days as a youth along the York River. To his point about sea level rise, there used to be a place on the Parkway called the Spit, which was like a little sand island across out into the river, where we used to go there and crab. We could catch a bushel of crabs in about an hour. So not only do you can't catch a bushel of crabs in a whole day of crabbing now, but that spit does not exist anymore. So I've seen that. My kids haven't been able to experience the things that I did as a child. And if we keep on this way, it's just going to get worse and worse. So for the last 25 years as a pediatrician, I've been helping families navigate all the changes. I used to get more upset with parents that were choosing not to vaccinate. Now I'm directing all my anger at the folks that are spreading misinformation. And until this year, that misinformation was coming from the internet. Now it's coming from our federal government. We can no longer, as a pediatrician, I can no longer tell my patients that I recommend vaccines according to the CDC schedule. I never thought in my career as a pediatrician that I would say those words. Now I reassure patients that we are following the American Academy of Pediatric guidelines on vaccines. I've had so many people bringing their newborns in here, and their first question is not, how's my baby doing? Am I going to be able to get my kid vaccinated? And that is just unconscionable to me as a physician, as a pediatrician who's spent my whole life making sure that kids are healthy, that have the opportunities, not just for getting their vaccines, but making sure they have everything they need to be successful in early childhood education and heading into kindergarten, heading in through high school, going off to college, getting a career technical education. That's another reason why I went. I've been a voice for those who don't have a voice. There's a reason why they're cutting benefits to those with Medicaid and SNAP, because the common theme there is they don't have a voice. They don't have a strong lobby. They don't have the means, the time. They're just barely trying to get by. So they don't have the ability to be here at rallies like this. So it's my job as a delegate to be their voice in the General Assembly, not only to make sure that the programs that are being cut at the federal level, that we do whatever we can at the state level to make sure that those folks don't lose those benefits. It's, that we're not going to be able to cover everyone, but we're trying to minimize the people that lose insurance as we face the devastating cuts from HR 1. But it's something that we have to do every day. And the other reason I ran in particular is that as a physician, a lot of physicians kind of really get upset with what the policy is being made in government, but we're not on the front line. I felt like if I'm going to make sure that good policy gets made, I need to be in that room in the Capitol, making sure that bad policy doesn't make it across the finish line and good policy does. So that's what I'm working for every day.
Thank you.
Yeah. And it's shocking how many people who are here today that are vaccinated themselves have chosen that that's not okay for anyone else to get, why they're spreading this misinformation. It's unconscionable. But it's important that we get more physicians in the General Assembly. I can't even have a doctor caucus because I'm the only doctor in the General Assembly. So for those of you who know a doctor who wants to be involved, send them my way. It is a hard job. I kind of compare it to residency. I had a full-time job as a pediatrician and a full-time job campaigning. It was an 80-hour-a-week job. It's kind of like residency, but it's something we need. We need more physicians in the General Assembly to make sure that we're protecting science. As Lieutenant Governor kind of highlighted all the cuts to our science, our investment. We have pharmaceutical companies that are choosing not to pursue future vaccines because they're not sure they're going to get funding from the federal government. They've stopped the mRNA research into a combined flu and COVID vaccine that would make it easier for people to get vaccinated. And there's all these things in the pipeline as far as vaccines that are kind of basically on hold until hopefully we wake up from this nightmare and we have a new administration that comes in that reasserts our reliance on science and vaccines to make sure that we protect our people. It's a national security issue. We don't have a healthy community. We're not going to be able to foster, a strong, healthy country and economy. So for all those reasons, and I'm sure you'll hear it over and over again, but it's critical that we stand up, and the best way to do that is to vote. You have a very important election coming up on April 21st, so you can vote then. You can vote this fall.
Vote early.
Vote early now, from now until the 21st, to kind of level the playing field. We have a chance in the fall to win back the House of Representatives, to make sure that all these things that are coming through in a Congress that's unwilling to check this president. We have a check and balance back in our federal level, and every day just kind of spread the word. There's the anti-vax movement is still a minority, but it's a loud minority. We are in the majority. We need to speak it to our neighbors, to our friends, to reassure them that vaccines are safe, they're effective. So that's my call of action for you guys as we stand up for science, stand up for vaccines. And I'm right here with you in the General Assembly, and I go back on the Monday after the General Assembly, back in my office, seeing my kids, making sure they stay vaccinated, stay healthy. So thank you all for coming out, and I can't wait to keep doing the work to make sure that Virginia is the model in the country to make sure that we protect science and our kids and families going forward. Thank you.
You know, I'm not in his district. I've got a fabulous delegate, by the way, Leslie Mehta. But I was very, very happy that he won, to get that knowledge in that House chamber. And with that, I want to introduce our final speaker, who has been a champion in this administration, fighting back hard day in, day out. She represents Virginia's 4th Congressional District, which is Richmond all the way down to the state line. She serves on the House Energy and Commerce Committee, where she defends the American people's access to health care, lower energy bills, and a clean and livable, sustainable planet. She served in the General Assembly for 17 years and was the chief Senate patron of the 2020 Virginia Clean Economy Act. Please welcome Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan.
First, I just have to say, Dr. Downey, if you think being in the House of Delegates is hard, just come to Congress for a day. I do want to thank you all for being here today and for the organizers for inviting me to speak. It is good to be back home and to be home all week, frankly, with an in-district work period and to get away from the insanity of Washington. But I'm excited that my first day back is to stand up for science. You know, we hear all the time, since we were children, we've heard that we have a government by, of, and for the people. What that means is government reflects the perspective and therefore meets the needs of the people who participate. So whether you're a scientist, a researcher, an educator, a student, an advocate, you understand the importance of science, and by being here today, you are making sure that your voice is heard and therefore your perspective will be met. You also got to vote. You also got to show up in that building. Yes, even to the 7:30 a.m. subcommittee meetings. I know they don't make it easy because you can do it virtually now. It is calling my office. It is sending emails and letters to your representatives and getting your, even if you think, well, she votes the right way, she's fighting the right way, we need to hear from you too. More importantly, getting your friends who live in districts where they have representatives who aren't standing up for science, making sure your voice is heard there as well. So I can't help but think about Dickens. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. We are living scientifically in the best of times and the worst of times. We are in the midst of a thrilling and constantly evolving age of scientific innovation. Across the nation, around the world, we've seen incredible progress in just this past year, ranging from breakthroughs in the treatment of diseases like sickle cell and pancreatic cancer to advancements in clean energy and storage to the rapidly evolving power of AI that is revolutionizing our digital technology, which, as any tool, can be used for both good or bad. And we know firsthand that this research touches upon each and every part of our lived experiences. Incredible scientific development has allowed us to live longer, healthier lives, move faster and more efficiently, communicate instantaneously. It has shrunken our world. And this has all been possible because of people. People who dare to be curious, to ask questions, to discover answers. I just left a Shabbat service where somebody made the point that science is about asking questions. And if you can't ask questions, then you just expect magic. That's the difference between science and magic, is asking questions. Why does this work? How does this work? How can we make it better? And revisiting as technology makes it easier to ask harder questions. People see problems and they want to solve them. And one of our most important national priorities should be giving innovators the resources that they need to ask and answer more questions. So in a lot of ways, it's the best of time because of how far we've gotten. But we're here today because it's also the worst of times. We've seen resources slashed for national research institutions, scientists and researchers fired, sometimes accidentally, with an oops. I didn't know what you do. Yeah, we know. Life-saving medical innovations have been put out of reach because of outrageous costs. Research has been discredited simply because it doesn't align with a political view or the whims of people in power. In 2025 alone, 7,800 research grants were canceled or frozen. Roughly 25,000 scientists and researchers terminated from their jobs, and proposed research budget cuts totaled an outstanding $32 billion. Federal agencies, as you've heard already, but I'll emphasize, have covered up the impacts of hazardous chemicals and pesticides and stripped environmental and safety regulation concerns from public policy, putting millions of Americans in harm's way, and especially in those communities that have been historically overburdened by pollution. Support for studies focused on the health of Black and brown and indigenous communities has been ripped away in the name of being too woke, and shutting people out, continuing to shut people out of medical research intentionally makes it harder for that research to reach the right answers. These hastily performed cuts and dangerous behavior from our federal institutions have not only uprooted the lives of scientists across sectors, jeopardized the safety of the American public, destroyed programs that have been making incredible progress, they have put our national security at risk. They've risked the United States' long-standing position as a leader in global research and innovation. As nations around the world, both allies and adversaries, forge ahead in scientific development, the United States has slammed on the brakes. And as you heard, that threatens to wipe out a generation of scientists and roll back our status as an innovative leader around the world. Across the country, both age-old and emerging problems demand cutting-edge research. There is much work left to be done, and yet we are fighting efforts to roll back progress we've already made. That is not sustainable. We have to continue fighting for an American scientific ecosystem because we know that truth and freedom in science, that truth and freedom and science are inextricably linked. When researchers can study their subjects and advance American innovation without fear of partisan attacks, that strengthens our democracy. When our nation's top scientists live in fear of losing their jobs for political reason, when the president pushes for a drill baby drill with no concern for the consequences, when pseudoscience creeps further and further into our national research institutions, our climate, our democracy, and our very freedom is threatened. Throughout history, we have seen what happens when governments put extreme ideology over evidence and censor scientists. Science and the lawyers are usually the first to go, and then fundamental freedoms and civil liberty follow. Some say history repeats itself. It may not repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And we must act decisively to ensure that the United States does not fall any deeper into age-old patterns. Millions of scientists, researchers, educators, students across the country are looking to us to get it right. As you heard, I fought now for 20 years, both in the General Assembly and now in Congress, to preserve our climate. For me, that was rooted in my faith. Often, people try to use faith as a wedge against science and say they're not compatible. But my faith helps me understand that science is how we try to understand what faith tells us. How does it work? And to ask the questions. And we cannot allow people to continue to pit faith and science against each other. They work together. They work together. And yet it's an age-old tactic that when you are trying to gain and keep power, you quash the very things that allow people to question your methods and your tactics. That's what we're seeing right now. Last Congress, I sat on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. And while we weren't in the majority, we did have the White House, and we were able, I went to NASA Langley and saw the incredible things that they were doing to advance our understanding of how greenhouse gases impact our planet. They were working on a program that would allow, when you get your weather report in the morning, you would also be able to see exactly how sea level rise, how pollutants would impact the asthma, like get an asthma report, using data to help democratize information for everything from farmers to deciding what to wear because of what the temperature was going to be, but also what the allergy reports would be. That program's gone. We made extraordinary, as somebody who almost died in childbirth, we were making extraordinary evidence-based progress addressing the underlying causes of why we have a maternal health crisis in America, where we get a D every year for maternal and infant health. Understand the reasons why a black woman is 3 times more likely to die, what the causes are, and what the causes are for white women. They're different. Now, we are struggling to even get the data to track, let alone solve those problems. But you have the power to turn this around. You have the power to turn this around in the voting booth. You have the power to turn this around in committee meetings. You have the power to turn this around in town halls. You have the power to turn this around by making your voice heard. Because again, I end where I started. In a government by, of, and for the people, government reflects the perspective and therefore meets the needs of the people who participate. And we have seen what happens when science deniers participate. We have seen that now they have been given outweighted influence over public policy, and we have seen it is costing and will continue to cost lives. It's time to fight back. I'm doing what I can. But I can't do it alone. I need friends.
Amen.
I need friends who believe in science. I have friends who believe that American ingenuity also means asking questions of how things work and how we can make it better. And not just saying, I'm going to shut down data that doesn't prove a point that isn't true. And so, yes, today is a day of action for science, but every day should be a day of action for science. And every day we need to make sure that we are fighting back against the extraordinary damage to the scientific community coming out of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and across the street from my office in the Department of HHS. And on now the Commerce and Labor Committee, we handle everything. If it moves, it's energy. If it doesn't, it's commerce. So whether it's environmental policy, healthcare policy, energy policy, manufacturing and trade, you name it, we deal with it. And I commit to you as the most junior member right now, but y'all are gonna help fix that. That my job is to continue to be curious, to ask questions and fight back. With your help, we will overcome this. It's been darker before. It's been darker before. But sometimes it's darkest just before the dawn. And I do believe that if we stay committed, if we follow the advice of John Lewis, who said democracy is not a state, it is an act that requires every generation to do its part, then for our children, our children's children, and their children, so that when they do their part, they're not doing it from another dark ages. Because so much of the data that has been collected in our generation has vanished. and not been built upon. If you do your part, it'll be much easier for them to do theirs. Thank you all for being here today.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. I appreciate all the work you do. She is 1,000 yards away from being my representative in the Congress. 1,000 yards. No, that's for now. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. We'll talk about that in a minute. Before we wrap up, I do want to leave with something a little more inspirational. I know most of y'all have heard of Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's one of my favorite science communicators. A few years ago, he did a very short film called Science in America. This is from 8 years ago. I want to read, I can't read it as good as he does, but I want to read it to you because it's very inspirational and meets the moment that we're in. How did America rise up from a backwoods country to be one of the greatest nations the world has ever known? We pioneered industries, and all of this required the greatest innovations in science and technology in the world. And so, science is a fundamental part of the country that we are. But in the 21st century, when it comes to making decisions about science, it seems to me that most people have lost the ability to judge what is true and what is not. What is reliable? What is not reliable? What should you believe? What should you not believe? And when you have people who don't know much about science standing in denial of it and rising to power, it is a recipe for the complete dismantling of our informed democracy. It is not the country that I remember growing up in. Not that we didn't have challenges. We had a hot war in Vietnam. We had a Cold War with the Soviets. We had the Civil Rights Movement. And all this was going on. But I don't remember a time when people were standing around in denial of what science was. One of the great things about science is that it is an entire exercise in finding out what is true. You've got a hypothesis, I can test it and get a result. A rival of mine will double check it because they think I might be wrong. So they perform a better experiment than I did. And they find out, hey, the experiment matches. We're on to something here. And out of this ongoing process emerges a new scientific truth. It does it better than anything else that we have ever come up with as human beings. This is science. It is not to be toyed with. It's not something to say, I choose not to believe E equals MC squared. You don't have that option. When you have an established scientific truth, it is true, whether or not you believe it. And the sooner you understand that, the faster we can get on with the political conversations about how to solve the problems that face us. Once you understand that humans are warming the planet, then you can have that political discussion about what to do. But every minute that one is in denial, you are delaying the political solution that should have been established years ago. As voters, scientific issues will come before us, and it is vital to say we should be scientifically literate so we can think about these issues and act intelligently upon them. Recognize what science is and allow it to be what it can and should be in the service of civilization. And that was from Neil deGrasse Tyson 8 years ago. A couple of announcements as we close. First of all, Nicole, come up here. Nicole, this is my friend Nicole Bailey. She's kind of a badass. Nicole, tell them what you want to tell them.
Okay. Hi, people. I'm sorry I had to call it audible, and I know Jennifer just called for friends to help her out in the Congress. So what we need to do, and this is statewide, is go out and vote. Okay, that's right. There is a referendum going on for mid-decade redistricting right now, all across Virginia. Voting started yesterday in Chesterfield, because I am a member of Chesterfield County Democratic Committee officers. The dates for it's going to be at Central Library. All right, from oops, of course I just hit the wrong thing. Y'all gonna have to bear with me. I tell you, technology is lovely when it works. Okay, Central Library at Lucy Core Boulevard from March 6th to April 18th. And then at North Courthouse Library, April 10th to April 18th. Yay. Yes, voting is going to be Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. We have 2 Saturdays and 1 Sunday, y'all. All right, and especially I would love to see Souls to the Polls on Sunday, because we fought hard for that to get a Sunday back. Okay, and they look at the numbers when they go forward in the next elections to see if we can have it again. So Saturday, April 11th and Saturday, April 18th from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. You can vote on a Saturday. And then on Sunday, April 12th, the lone Sunday, will be from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. So please, you are the trusted messengers in your communities. Please vote. Take people to vote. Tell everybody at work, at school, at church, whatever groups you're a part of. Spread the word far and wide. Vote yes on the redistricting referendum. Yes. Vote yes on the redistricting referendum. Can I hear a yes?
Yes!
Can I get a yes?
Yes!
Well, amen. All right, let's close this thing out.
All right, they're going to run us out of here, but real quick, thanks to the people at RVA Indivisible for getting the word out, and we'll see you at the No Kings rally 3 weeks from today over at Monroe Park. Again, thank you. For more information about Stand Up for Science, go to standupforscience.net. That's the bell. We got to go. I got a QR code. Come see me. Thank y'all. Have a good weekend.